questions, and we'll see them and we'll answer them. That way I can read the question out loud, and everyone should be able to hear it. If you're having problems logging in or you have any other issues, Andrew Altmeyer is at his desk, and his phone number should be in the email that he sent you earlier today. You can call him for some questions on how to use GoToWebinar. This is the first time we've used GoToWebinar, so hopefully we don't have too many technical difficulties with that. So MaineHousing is doing a new continuous improvement initiative, and we're very excited. We're hoping this new budget format is easier to use and works better for everyone. We definitely want any feedback that you have on it. We're always going to be improving this process, so we want it to work for you as well as us. This may get a little boring. We're going to go through it tab by tab, and hopefully we'll answer all the questions that you have. If you do have a question, just type in your questions, and we'll deal with them as we go through it. And we're just hoping that this will be an informal sharing of information. So, did everyone see the message? It says, "Is everyone able to hear us and see the screen?" If you are having difficulties, can you type in a response, please? We'll give you a couple of seconds to do that.
Or if you could confirm that you are seeing the screen and hearing us.
I'll sit in Brewer. That's great.
Yeah. Something about the budget.
Can you drag that down?
I have no idea how.
Well, people are saying yes, so I would guess we're good.
Oh, good. Looks like everybody is hearing us and seeing us.
Perfect.
I think we can go ahead and get started.
Yes, thank you so much for your feedback. We numbered the tabs, and if you go through them tab by tab, it probably would be easier. We greatly appreciate it if you have everyone read the general directions to start off with. This annual budget is a projection of operations for the coming fiscal year, and it's required due to your mortgage documents. It's a planning and financial control aid. We're hoping that you will actually use this process to control your expenses over the years. It establishes performance objectives, and it compares actual against objectives, and then it determines reasons for the deviations. The budget must be submitted, not password protected, electronically to financial reporting at MaineHousing.org. It must be submitted with all the addendums and schedules completed as applicable. Not all of them may be applicable to you. Please complete the tabs in numerical order, beginning with either tab 2 or 3 as applicable, depending on your rent, depending on what kind of property you are.
Cindy, we just had a question about the shade of probably the blue on the screen, and it's probably how it's on your computer, so you might just have to change that, the tint on their computer, right?
Yes, we did find that depending on the screens we used, the coloring varies widely, and we found sometimes it wasn't easy to read, but we found that changing the color, the darkness of the blue, didn't help us. We actually had to change the screen settings. I hope that helps. The budget must be submitted to the owner for approval prior to submission to MaineHousing. We want to make sure the owner understands what their management company is providing MaineHousing for information. And since the annual budget must be submitted prior to the close of the current fiscal years, the expenditures for the last 2 or 3 months of operation must be included in the annualized in order to complete the current year annualized actuals. So on the annual budget tab, you put in the first column typically is last year's approved budget, and then the second column is the current year annualized actuals. So if you're submitting the budget prior to fiscal year end, which of course you always are, you have to annualize the expenditures for the last 2 or 3 months. We changed the format, and we're hoping it makes it clearer because all of the white cells must be completed. The gray cells are auto-filled formulas, and the blue cells are for MaineHousing use only. Once the budget amounts for the column current year accepted MaineHousing budget and the amounts for the next year's proposed budget are entered, the percentage change between the 2 budget years will automatically calculate, and that's no different than it always has been. The format of the actual budget hasn't changed a whole lot. Significant percentages, 5% increase or decrease, must be clarified and explained in the notes column on the annual budget. In addition, line items that have narrative explanations available in the comment boxes will be noted with red triangles in the upper right-hand corner. Can you scroll down? Once the budget amounts are reviewed and adjusted as necessary, the budget will be returned to the owner or management agent.
So I am going to address a question that was just posed regarding receiving an unlocked or unpassword protected version. That is not something that we will have available. The document will be password protected. I know that some agencies develop their own narrative, but we are providing space for comments to be made for any deviations over or below 5%. That would be the narrative that we would want to see on the budget or any of the schedules.
Our first major change was our rent schedule. We found that our rent schedule really only accommodated people who were strictly Section 8. So we broke it out to Section 8 and other. So this schedule, tab number 2, is the rent schedule for properties that have only Section 8 and nothing else. It's very similar to what we had previously. Allison is going to fill in some information so that we can see how the budget works, because like property name, as you add in the property name, it will fill in subsequent tabs so that you only have to enter it once. We do ask that you actually enter the information though. We found that cutting and pasting can cause problems with the formulas in the spreadsheet. So
we're going to enter information for a fictitious property. I think, as Cindy had said, you will fill out the tabs going left to right. So our fictitious property is not a Section 8 only. It is going to be a more complicated project than that, as many of ours are. So we are going to enter the name of the property. When you enter some of the information here for the property, if it's a white cell, many of them carry forward, so you will only have to enter it on the rent schedule tab that is applicable to your property, and then the information will carry forward.
That is one reason why it's important to follow the tabs accordingly, starting with 1, 2, 3, so the information flows correctly.
So this rent increase effective date must be a date because it is formula driven later in the, lower in the tab.
So if you were to enter something such as unknown, because you don't know what the, if I could spell it, that would be better, right? You will receive an error message. You do need to fill it in with an actual date. So we're going to say that this is chart effective date.
Is the actual chart that you're using. So you'd want it to be the most recent chart that you're working off from. And the county and MSA is the rent chart, not the property county.
Sorry, I'm trying to, please lighten the blue.
No, it's just one after that. So the first question was, we mentioned this was only for Section 8 properties, but that was just for tab number 2, the rent schedule Section 8 only. Tab number 3 would be for properties that contain tax credit, Fed home, an RLP, or a combination of the previous and Section 8.
I don't have, we're having trouble seeing the questions. The box is quite small.
The next question was that the rent effective date can be different for different units.
I would say that date going forward.
Well, when you are on the bottom, you're going to be picking your months at current and your months at the proposed rent. So at some point, you're picking a date. So I'm not sure.
And again, the budget is a projection.
Right.
And I guess maybe I would discuss with your asset manager what you've done in the past, because that's actually not a change on this budget, because you would have still been projecting forward.
So as you can see, there's a lot of drop-down menus. One of the new features, good features, is the proposed gross rent. Until the maximum allowable rent is put in there, it's going to turn yellow, indicating you may have a problem. So when Allison goes in and puts 900 in the maximum allowable rent, it's going to go gray. But if she had put in 800, then it would have stayed yellow, and you would have known you're over your chart rents, and there would be a problem that you might be charging too much.
And we know we have had a few questions regarding having 50% units or 60% unit, and you have 2 different sizes of those units. You would still pick that it's a 2-bedroom, that it's a 50% unit. You may have 5 more of these. These are $850 because it's a bigger unit. You're proposing 900. Oops. Not that much. That's too much. Another $50 for utilities. So we'll make this $175 for utilities, bigger unit. And this is going to be $1,000. Zero happy. So you can enter any combination of units. There's 0 bedrooms up to 4-bedroom unit types. The rent restrictions go from 30, 40s, 50s with PBVs, low home, high home, low home PBVs, high home PBV, housing trust fund, when applicable, 811 PRA, when applicable, and market units. Are there more questions?
And as you noticed when Allison did that, it does not fill if you put a number in there. You really have to use the drop downs to choose the bedroom size. And even though markets do not have a maximum allowable rent, you're going to want to put whatever the proposed gross rent is into the maximum allowable rent column so that it isn't yellow. It doesn't look like a problem. Okay, we have another question.
It's the same question.
Same question. Sorry. We're still getting used to this go to meeting format.
And then we'll try our best to answer all the questions, and if there are anything that we missed, we'll go back and we can try to respond accordingly.
Do you guys have the chat option at the bottom of your screen on the GoToWebinar? Occasionally that's an easier method to answer questions. If someone would like to try that, they can see that chat drop-down menu. I'm going to enter a couple more units. Great. 35. We did not have chat option, so let's go back up to our questions just to make sure. So once you've entered all the applicable rent information for all of your unit types, the bottom of the page is where you'll have to enter the number of months at current rent, the number of months at proposed rent, oops, that's a really healthy property. What are we putting here, guys?
So your tenant share is, this is where you would break out, people have been asking where you put your subsidy. So your tenant share would be what you're collecting from your tenants. Subsidy would be any of your vouchered tenants' rent amount. So that's where that gets broken out.
And I know there has been a question that those numbers might not necessarily match, and that's okay, because if you're receiving additional subsidy from the Housing Choice Voucher Program, then those numbers may not match.
So your vacancy percentage should never be a negative, because that increases the rental income. So we've had some be submitted with a negative, so it needs to be a positive. And it looks like we have another question.
Yeah.
So the next section used to be about consumption. Now we're just looking to be able to prove back to your utility allowance that you've used above. So this is strictly only about what the tenants actually pay for themselves now. It's important to specify who you're using the utility allowance through.
Whether it's Section 8 UA through a state housing authority, a local housing authority, or...
And which housing authority? Yeah.
Yes, and please specify which housing authority.
Does anybody have any other questions on the rent schedule?
So Addendum A has drastically changed, and here we might have to toggle back and forth because a lot of the items that used to be on Addendum A are actually on the annual budget tab now. What's currently here was here before. This form is completed only if you have an approved Addendum A to your management agreement. This form must be includes acceptable property, site office expenses charged to the project. The white cells must be completed by the owner manager. This is a regular format that we've had for years. Current year accepted is the budget approved previous year. Current year annualized is annualized due to the submission date of the budget. And then next year is your proposed budget. And please note any significant changes over 5% up or down. It will turn yellow if the percentage is more than 5%. Let Andrew show us that. So in the percentage change is the same as it's always been. It's comparing next year proposed budget to the previous year, or the current year accepted MaineHousing budget for that year. So it's a 20% change. So we would be expecting some sort of explanation on the change in the notes section.
So the previous budget form that we had had a tab for notes, and one thing that we tried to do was pull the notes into the separate tab so you're able to enter them right there. So you'll see that tab is gone, but where it turns yellow is where you can put those notes now.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a question. One moment.
There's one about that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's regarding staff training and project software fees. Training is a line item on the annual budget. I believe it's line 53, and it's the travel to and from trainings and conferences. That's where those travel pieces pertaining to travel and conferences would go. As far as the bookkeeping fees, those are going to remain on the Addendum A, and it will be under property bookkeeping fees, accounting services. That's where those fees would be applicable. I believe there's another question.
The note section, the question was, is there a limited number of characters that you can add in there? And I do not believe that there is.
You may not be able to view the whole note, but you can still continue to add information.
I believe that Excel used to have a limit of 365 characters. I don't know if that still exists, but we can certainly look into that to make sure.
Employee fringe benefits.
So first we have just travel, not training itself. That's correct. It would be the travel to and from the training.
There's a fringe benefit, and that would just be covered over under office salaries.
Right, and then they were asking about employee fringe benefits, and that really should be included in the site manager or superintendent salaries. It should be included in the salaries portion. I hope that answered your question.
And as you can see, the top of this tab, the property name and address and management agent, all that information has filled in from the rent schedule. And depending on which rent schedule you complete, that information will fill through.
So I'd like to skip to tab 8 just for a second, because this form is much smaller than it used to be, and a lot of what was on the form is now on the annual budget tab. So it will not be included in your management fees any longer.
So such as background checks, property, postage copier, interpreting, bank charges, rent comp studies, all of that was moved over here, as well as the travel to training and other.
Gina's asking where you budget the actual training to get.
we're hoping that this will alleviate some of the questions and make things much clearer. I do want to move on to the resident service tab. Tab number 5 is resident services. We would really like it if you would, we need to find out who your resident service person is, the date of hire, how many days a week they work, how many hours a week, and to detail below the scope of their tasks. So this form must only be completed if the property RSC services are paid for by the property through operating funds or grants. If a third party is paying for your resident service services, it should not be included on this addendum. The white cells, again, is what you should fill out. It's the same format it's been forever. I think we may have reduced the number of lines. I don't think any of that is going to be a problem, though. And like all tabs, if it's over or under a 5% change, please give us a note on that.
One thing we want to emphasize, and you'll see that the note is at the top of most of the pages, is that column C is the current year accepted MaineHousing budget, and that is the budget that we have accepted from the prior year. A lot of times if there's some adjustments that MaineHousing has to make and sends out with the budget letter, when the next year comes in, we're not seeing those adjustments, so we want to make sure that comes through.
We have added some, we moved some of the schedules off the annual budget tab and have put them on their own tab. So these transaction schedules really were just at the end of the annual budget previously, and it's really just reserve information. Same thing, this schedule has not changed. We want to know what your estimated end of balance this year is, what your deposits, interest, and withdrawals are going to be, so that we know what the balance at the end of the year are going to be. And the planned fixed asset transactions is the same thing it used to be. We've added a whole lot more lines. That was fitting everything in those couple of lines was a problem. So we really would like you to break everything out, each individual items. We would like windows on one line, doors on another. And it's a similar format to what we had before.
So some of you may have printed off the very first budget. We have gotten some budgets in on the new form. We were not sure if this tab was being skipped because they were new properties and they didn't have any planned fixed assets. So the bottom, the reserve information also wasn't being filled out. So we flipped it to the top to make sure that it has wouldn't be missed. So if you have a form that looks different that you may have looked at, there is a new form out on our website.
Yes.
Hopefully that makes more sense, having that one on top and the fixed assets after.
And a good point to just make sure you scroll down always.
What? So do we have another question?
Yeah.
So the last version was.
Since the last question. We should be reading the whole question.
Okay, so we have a question.
Yes, my template has the reserve. Scroll down.
Yeah.
Accounts under the fixed assets. Yes, so Tina just explained that. The form did get modified since the last version was published.
And that's currently, the most current is on our website right now.
Yes.
And if anybody has trouble locating that, you can reach out to one of us and we can assist you on that.
So we broke out commercial income because many of you do not have commercial income. It's the same as it was. It used to be on the annual budget tab. It's just now here. If your property was developed to include commercial in your gross effective income, we need you to check the box up on the right-hand side, right there. Yes, we need you to check. How do you check that box? And that pulls your commercial income into the annual budget tab. If your commercial income is not applicable to your actual property, this will not go in if you don't check the box. It will not flow through to the annual budget tab if you don't check the box, because we are now using the numbers for different reasons and doing different ratios, and this will help us out. We want to make sure that we're accounting for your income accurately, because everyone is different. Now our annual budget tab is very similar to what it was before. The income is at the top of the page instead of at the bottom, which we thought just kind of made accounting sense. We don't break out subsidy and tenant portion anymore. It's just a total, but it is broken out on our rent schedule so that we do have that information. As you can, there's the commercial. As you can see, there's like one line. It says total commercial income, and it pulls it in from the previous schedule. I'm trying to think. We added those lines in under administrative expenses. So we're hoping that will clarify issues with your management fee percentages and alleviate some of those problems. Other than that, we didn't make a whole lot of changes to the line items. Can you scroll down?
We really tried to just make everything flow better, and that's why it's so important to fill out the tabs from left to right. So you'll see a lot of the information flows into the annual budget.
And it's important, if you put anything in the other admin column, to please identify those in the comment section.
And I know that there had been a question specific to actual training. Obviously, we've gone over the travel to and from trainings and conferences. The only type of training that should be actually listed on the annual budget is, for example, a Marima or a Tri-State, those types of conferences or trainings. Those can be put onto the budget on line 54, other admin, and you can provide an explanation. Trainings such as COS, tax credit, for example, those we do not and historically have not viewed as cost to be borne by the project.
So I think we've covered the whole budget. There are some calculations at the bottom that weren't there before, but those are all just formulas, just new information that we're looking at. But other than that, I know the budget looks very different, but there aren't a whole lot of changes to this page besides moving expenses from Addendum A to the annual budget tab. Does anyone have any other questions?
One thing that hasn't changed, but that's still there, are the little red triangles up in the corners. And if you, like you'll see Andrew's doing, just kind of hold over those, it provides a little bit of information for you.
We're hoping that this format is easier to use and makes more sense. We definitely want your feedback. We want your feedback on this webinar. Did this webinar help? Did you like the informal format that we used, or would you rather have something a little more formal? You know, anything you'd like to give us for feedback, we would love to have. We're always trying to make things better. We're trying to communicate better than we have in the past. And we're just hoping to give out more information than we have.
The webinar is being recorded, so we will be putting this in a location for if you have other staff members that want to listen to it at a later date.
Okay, I think we have a question.
The first one is here.
Tax and insurance deposits need to be higher than 2018 billings to provide for next year's higher bills. Where do we?
That's a separate question.
Where do we provide for next? Oh, that's both comment.
Yes.
Okay. So at the.
So is that a question?
You're right. So every year it typically escalates. Your insurance and taxes escalate, and you do need to enter that information on here. But that really hasn't changed because it just asks what the deposits are. So it asks what the current deposits are for the year. So you would calculate that and make that change and enter that information into the.
And that will auto feed back onto the transaction schedule tab.
Right, so you're going to enter it here on the annual budget tab, and it will populate Schedule 6.
The transaction schedule has some things that do flow forward and some things that flow back to them. You'll see the gray cells are formulas, so those flow back from the annual budget, and then the white cells would flow forward.
Next question is regarding capital items.
Where do you put the ones that will be paid from operating expenses and not replacement?
Again, this really works the same way as it always has. Please list all of the expenditures. So you'll list all the expenditures here. Then on the annual budget tab, it works the same way it did before. You would, yes, thank you. You would tell us how much is coming from the reserve, and you would tell us the total. So how much is coming out of the reserve would go on line 97, restricted reserve withdrawals, and then on line 98, you would tell us the total assets, and the difference between what's coming out of the reserve and the fixed assets is fixed assets coming out of operations.
And if Andrew, if you could go back to transaction schedules, you can see here that we do not have a feature where you have to provide a note if it's an over or under 5% discrepancy. What we want you to put there in the note, you can put that it's replacement reserve, operating. That's where you can indicate what items those fall under for categories. Is there another one under there, Andrew?
The question is, do we plan to make any more changes?
So we don't plan to make any more small changes. We hope to table a lot of those on a kind of a yearly basis. Obviously, if there's something that comes up that's that we need to make a change for everyone to be able to adequately use it, we will. But we don't plan to make any small changes after this final training, and we go from there.
And I believe your question was specific to Friday. That was the last time a notice went out. There is a more recent version out on the website. The link was included in the webinar information. It doesn't have a whole lot of actual formatting changes or informational changes, but that is the newest format that's out there, is on the website right now.
If you've already started working on the format that we sent out on Friday, send that in. That's a perfectly acceptable format, and that would be fine. but this is continuous improvement. We would love some feedback if you have some good ideas. You know, we would definitely take that into account and make changes and roll that out again next year.
Will the quarterly reports be changed to match this new format? Which quarterly reports would you be referring to? Ricky, thank you for your comment. We're glad that this webinar is working good for you, considering you are a great distance away from us. I submitted a budget today using the old format for 10/31/18. Will that be accepted?
Yes, we will accept that. Thank you very much for sending that. We were really rolling this new format out for year ends of 12/31. We knew that October 31st year end was going to be difficult.
We'll wait a few more minutes just to make sure that there aren't any additional questions.
And you're always welcome to touch base with us, any of us, if you have questions later on, or you come up with something, or you think of something as you're going through the process.
So if you haven't begun working on your budget, we would encourage you to hold off until tomorrow. We will be sending out an asset management notice with the updated link, just based off any changes that we may have to make after the webinar. So if you have not started, hold off until tomorrow. Is there anything else down there, Andrew?
Just the dining.
So I don't think anybody else has any more questions. We hope this really worked for you, and we'd love some feedback. Thank you so much for attending, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of us, and have a great day.